Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon and good morning, wherever you are. My name is Modesta Lin, and welcome to the African Free Continental Free Trade Area webinar series. This is our very first webinar, so this is the very launch by Liberty Sparks, and we'll be able to take you through different topics around the AfCFTA, and we'll be able to dissect different issues surrounding so we'll be able to dissect the different issues and concerns surrounding the African Free Continental Trade Area, and we'll be able to cover different topics related to the same. A bit of a background, Liberty Sparks is a non-partisan think tank that is based in Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. And we're able to discuss different issues surrounding liberty, especially in the aspects of policy and economic development. And we're hoping that this platform will be able to raise more questions and conversation concerning the AU Agenda 2063 AfCFTA, which began implementation in 2021. So just a disclaimer that the conversation that will be happening today is based on personal opinions and do not fully represent the ideas of Liberty Sparks. And I really hope that we can be able to engage through this platform and we may be able to have more conversation. So we have various speakers for today, and one of them is here, I believe, yes. So all our speakers are here, two of our speakers are here. So I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves. Meanwhile, I'll just repeat for those who joined us now. My name is Modesta Lin. I am the Head of Administration, Liberty Sparks Kenya, and I will be your host for this webinar. With us are our speakers, and we have Landry Peter, we have Leonard, and we have Fee Sade, and we'll give them an opportunity to be able to introduce themselves, give us a brief background before we jump right in. I'll have you, Landry Peter, maybe you can begin since you're the first of the call.
Hello, Modesta, and hello everyone, Evans and every other person. Greetings to you. My name is Landry Peter Ilfiso. I am the co-founder and executive director of Ominira Initiative for Economic Advancement. That's a non-profit organization here in Nigeria promoting freedom and prosperity. I think that's, I will just keep it brief like that and let others introduce themselves as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Landry, and we look forward to the conversations that we'll have today. I believe we have our other speaker on the call as well. I'm not so sure. Leonard, can you hear me?
Hi, Lynn.
Okay, great. Maybe you can give us a brief introduction about yourself before we are able to begin.
All right. My name is Leonard Ogunwade. I am the founder, president, and the CEO of Face of Liberty International, based in Nigeria. It's great to be on this call today. Larry is a very good friend, a brother in the Liberty movement, and it's great to share the same stage with him today. And even the third speaker, we'll run things together out here in Nigeria. And I'm a nature lover, as you can see. I'm actually in a nature park right now, speaking to people. So let's keep it that way. We'll get to know ourselves better later. Thank you.
Okay. It's great meeting you, and it's great to have friends in the call. So thank you every single person for attending, and I really hope we can be able to have a very interactive session today. So I think I'll jump right into it. To Landry, I think I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Leonard. I think I just want to find out, just to be able to give us a sense of introductory feeling to the AfCFTA. What are your thoughts on the objective of AfCFTA, and just how it aims to benefit Africa and the global community, since there's the objective of AfCFTA being able to open up the African borders to trade and be able to develop this. So how do you feel the objectives are going to be met, and what are these main objectives that you feel are outright in the AfCFTA?
Okay, thank you, Modesta. I think that the African Continental Free Trade Area or Agreement is a great initiative. I am an optimist. of AfCFTA, and that is despite the many challenges that the continent is faced with in the process of implementing and getting the agreement in motion. The AfCFTA has a great benefit. I mean, we have all we've all seen what trade can do for a region in Europe. European Union is an example of one of the ways that trade can help a group of people or nations succeed. And it's the same in North America. It's the same in Asia. We see that in the regions of the world, regional trade is critical. It's one of the means of eradicating poverty. And that was the goal, the Pan-African goal of the leaders, back in the early 2000s when this agreement, this idea came to life. But it was, years of discussions among the African leaders, got to 2018. And it was then that 44 African countries signed this agreement. It was since 2018 that AfCFTA started becoming a real thing. And is quite making the buzz right now. And for all the right reasons. For one, is going to boost intra-African trade, which is the lowest among regions of the world. If intra-African trade, I mean, the share of African exports to other African nations is just about 15% compared to 60% that it is in Europe, compared to about 40% in North America and 30% in Asia. So it's high time that Africa, remove the borders and trade with each other. But it's not just that only. It's also the fact that there's going to be one big African market, which is a market of over 1 billion people. That's huge. And that can help economies and that can help economies on the continent scale. There's also the benefit of the opportunities that it would afford young Africans, because remember, we're talking about trade. AfCFTA is not just about trade only, it's also about the freedom of the free movement of Africans. So the benefits and the potential is huge. And that's why I am an optimist, despite the challenges that is in the way.
Thank you so much, Andre. And I love how you brought in the aspect of freedom, that it's just AfCFTA is beyond just simply trade, it's also freedom for Africans. And I think I want to use this to also jump into my next conversation with you, Leonard. I mean, we've talked about how this benefits Africa, and Landry was able to speak about aspects of statistics when it comes to how the other global community, other continents have been able to benefit from trade among themselves. I just want to find out maybe from you, how do you feel that Africans opening up this trade will also benefit the global community, and how this also translates to us benefiting from the global community? Were you able to hear me, Leonard?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, although the video is creating a bit of a hitch.
Okay,
we can hear you.
Let me. I think I'll put the right.
You can go ahead, though. We can hear you.
Is it better now?
Not yet, but you can go ahead. Now perfect. We can see you now.
Oh, okay. So if I can get your question correctly, you may mention what are the benefits that opening the AfCFTA agreement will do for the global community. Okay, so I totally agree with Larry with what Larry said about what it's going to do for Africa and what he mentioned for the global community. But I think I can highlight 3 points where it will benefit the global community. And the first one of them is it will boost economic growth. And how do I mean it will boost economic growth? By promoting economic integration and also cooperation among African countries, the AfCFTA agreement has the potential to contribute to increased economic growth and development across the continent. This is part of what it does for Africa, but it does the same thing for the global community. And apart from that, it will provide new market opportunities. And with that, we will have more investors investing in Africa. They would have more money going back to their community because they're investing in Africa and they are making more money from Africa going back to their community. So it's a two-way thing. It's to boost Africa and to boost the other community. And apart from that, it will also encourage sustainable development. How do I mean? This agreement has the potential to encourage sustainable development by promoting trade and investment in environmentally friendly industries. And also, it can also support the development of green technologies. In Africa currently, we don't have a Tesla in Africa, but there's a Tesla out there. If this agreement is properly open, we can have a Tesla in Africa. And guess what? We have all the resources needed to run a, what will I call it? An electric car out here in Africa. So we don't need to go and look for raw materials somewhere else. But now because the agreement is being implemented, it's easier for investors to come in, and that will help also in developing green technologies in Africa. So I think those three are what I've highlighted so far, that it should benefit the global community. Thank you.
I love what you said. Thank you so much for your comments. And I think you've touched to my heart because I am a climate change advocate. So just being able to understand how this will be able to invest more in green technology is something that really touches my heart. And there's something you talked about with sustainable development. And I think I want to throw this to you, Landry. So there's the aspect of implementation, and there's a discussion I was part of, a debate actually with some few students, and they were part of the discourse was how this implementation of the AfCFTA may affect industries in the different parts of African countries. So running the risk of, reputation of some industries and also some local industries dying because of this trade between borders. So I want to understand from you how the implementation process will look like and how this will affect different industries in the African continent, and whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. What are the positives and negatives of this happening in the implementation process?
Okay, thank you for that. I believe that the AfCFTA would actually help all industries in Africa. However, I agree that there will be winners and losers, and that's because when free trade exists, when in any society where when society is open to free trade, what you find is that there would be some industries would be winners, while one or two industries may fizzle out. And the reason for that is simply what economists would call comparative advantage. Comparative advantage is that economic theory that explains why or how an economy, the ease of producing a good in a particular economy gives that economy an advantage. For instance, if AfCFTA gets into implementation, Nigeria would be one of the countries in Africa that will supply petroleum products, refined petroleum products, if the country is able to refine it. Why? Because it has the most. I'm not very sure if Nigeria has the most oil resources, or you get what I mean. But Nigeria is one of the countries in the world, one of the oil exporting countries in the world. So, and on the other hand, if you look at Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, which are both the top two countries that export cocoa, you would see that every country has what they have the most. every country has a comparative advantage. And in that sense, what it means is that what you have the most of, what you have in excess, is what you will then specialize in. And the continent would be able to say, okay, Nigeria, Angola, Libya are the countries that produce the most oil. So the continent would depend on those countries for that. While some other countries, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana provides this other country provides Kenya. I'm not sure there's any country in Africa that has the more tea than Kenya. So there's of course the whole continent is richly blessed in natural resources, but we have comparative advantage. So that, in a sense, should not we shouldn't harbor fear, that some industries will have to die. Of course, if you're producing what is not production, you need to have a low cost of production to exceed or to succeed in business, to eat good profits. So if you're producing and your cost of production is too high, and somewhere in another country can produce it cheaply and bring it to your country even cheaper than how you are doing it, the people in your country will buy it. So that means those businesses in that area would likely go in extinction. But in the long term, free trade for all societies involved is always a gain, because at the end of the day, each country would find their comparative advantage, and consumers would have access to cheaper goods and cheaper and quality goods. I hope that answers it.
Yes, it does. And I think this also brings me to my next question, Leonard, maybe on the same. So Landry has talked about comparative advantage and at some extent also disruptive business. So at some point, different countries have different kind of like specific imports or exports that they are able to produce, and there's the aspect of comparative advantage. So I want to find out maybe your thoughts on the same, how this implementation will also look for the different industries, and if you think this comparative advantage will also work for sustainable development, especially in the African countries.
Okay, thank you, Modesta. In my own opinion, right, I think the AfCFTA agreement will cut across virtually all the industries. I think I'm going to talk about three. I'm going to be talking more about like three things. So bear with me. I will first of all talk about the small and medium-sized enterprise, the SMEs. We all know fully well that the SMEs makes the majority of business anywhere in the world. In Africa, we don't have data. But in America, there is data. Currently, the SMEs, the small businesses, makes about 94% of the business in America. We don't know how much is it in Africa. It might be 99% in Africa because we don't have data, but we can always leverage on the data. But we all know around ourselves that the SMEs make up the majority of businesses in Africa. And this agreement is expected to benefit this set of people. How? By having them opportunity to gain access to new markets to sell to, reducing the cost of inputs, and apart from that, improving their competitiveness. When I can make my product without so much pressure, and I can sell to someone else somewhere, in another country, in another location, without the hassle of too much border control and immigration problem, it solves one problem. It solves one problem in that place for the SMEs. Now that's one. Two, for even the service providers. For service providers, the agreement will help them in order to ratify things they need to do. Example of this, we can go into finance, tourism, and telecommunication. Currently, I was talking to someone recently. In Nigeria, we have scarcity of funds. Everybody's trying to go cashless currently. The CBN is not releasing money to the public. There's riot, there is chaos. People want the money, no fuel, nothing. And I was telling them, okay, do you know that in Kenya, Modesta, you'll be able to attest to this. In Kenya, virtually, I don't know if this is correct. My stats might be wrong, but I can say about 60% of Kenyans do not deal in cash. Am I right or right, Modesta?
Very right.
Okay. Why? Because there is M-Pesa everywhere. I was in Kenya some months ago. Oh, 90%. You see, someone who doesn't, 90% don't deal in cash because there is M-Pesa everywhere. Even the malam selling something and that street corner has M-Pesa. That woman selling tomato and pepper has M-Pesa. But we don't have such in Nigeria. And you want to implement the cashless policy. It's hard on people. You have money, you can access your account. It happens to me. I can categorically tell you for the past 2 weeks or thereabout, I've not touched cash. Wherever I cannot pay in whether POL, ATM, POS, or transfer, then I'm not patronizing that person. That's how it works. Because I cannot queue to collect money. And apart from that, I can't be using, say, let me try and use it in your currency. Say you want to collect 20 Kenya shillings, but for you to collect 20 Kenya shillings, you have to pay 4 Kenya shillings to collect 20 Kenya shillings. We're not talking about naira, dollars to shillings. You're talking of shillings to shillings. So the answer that people go online and like, how much is naira to naira on the parallel market? As a joke. You see, things like this, when it comes, the AfCFTA agreement will cut across so many things. Finances, tourism, telecommunication. It will eliminate the barrier in trade and service, which could lead to increase in cross-border trade in these sectors. And by doing that, it will provide opportunity for investment and the transfer of technology and skills. I was mentioning Tesla the other time. If we have all the things we need to make Tesla in Africa, and the AfCFTA agreement allows the set of people that are making this thing to come to Africa, obviously they're not going to bring all the people that are going to work for them all the way from America or from wherever they come from. They will employ people here. People will learn new skills, and when they get the new skills, 1-2 person will move out of that company and start their own company. Competition starts. That's how telecommunication problem started in Africa. I remember when telecommunication came to Nigeria in 2001, MTN came, they're selling their SIM card for 35,000 naira. That's currently about $50. They're selling for 35,000 naira. But now, hello, it's free. Yes, it's free now for you to get. Because there are like 4 or 5 different companies doing the same thing. They have to drop their price to stay in the market. There is one service provider right now that when you load 2,000 naira on your phone, when you load 1.5 on your phone, you get an airtime of 6,000 naira. Because it's competition right now. So this will help a lot of service providers when this come in. And it's not just going to be inter-country, not going to be intra-country, it will be intra-country, going around the country. And I think let me mention one more. In agriculture, it will benefit people in agriculture. And how do I mean? Because it's going to provide new market opportunity for African farmers and agribusiness. Larry mentioned Kenya about tea. We all know Kenya is the owner of tea. We know Uganda is the owner of cotton in Africa. Nigeria used to be the owner of cocoa, but we are not. I don't think we are anymore. I stand corrected, but I don't think we are anymore. There's so many countries that does this thing. When this happens, when the AfCFTA fully get into action, more inter-country businesses will come in, and this will lead to increased exportation, greater competitiveness, and improved food security, which we don't have in this continent at all. Especially, I know in Nigeria, we don't have food security. So I said I'm going to mention 3. Back to you, Modesta.
I love how we're working with the digits of 3 with you, Leonard. And so I have a comment from Patricia in terms of specific statistics. She says that Kenyans' use of online mobile cash system is at 60%. But I think the conversation was around how largely Kenyans use mobile banking. Just before we continue this conversation, one of our speakers is here. Faisade, maybe you can be able to introduce yourself and also maybe tell us how you feel about the implementation process and how it affects the industries in Africa. So maybe an introduction, and then maybe you can jump into the conversation.
Okay, good afternoon from Nigeria. Apologies for joining in late. I had a bit of a scheduling issue. So concerning the question that you asked, let me appreciate, first of all, the other speakers who've been speaking so forth. They've done quite some justice to the subject from the few minutes I've been on listening to them. Now, I would like to start by saying, first of all, we need to appreciate it as a policy of the African Union that seeks to unite African countries with trade. Okay, before the colonial masters came to Africa and divided our continent into this, multiple countries and created these artificial borders that we have now, we had a very different arrangement, and people used to trade freely, relatively freely across borders, or at least they traded in a very different way from how it has been since. And we, over the years after colonization, have found ourselves in a place in Africa where we were trading, or we still are trading more with the West than amongst ourselves. Okay, so we have a situation where Nigeria, for example, is bordered by Cameroon, by Niger Republic, by Chad and Benin Republic, only for Nigeria to be doing more trade with America and Canada and even Australia, which are very, very, very far away, than we do with our actual neighbors, and you can imagine the situation of some landlocked African countries is even worse. So AfCFTA is a policy that seeks to bring a solution, to encourage trade between and amongst African countries, so that if you want to buy shoes in Kenya, it should be, it's more in the interest of you as an African living in Nairobi to import your shoes from Aba in Nigeria than to import your shoes from Italy, in Europe. So that's fundamental objective of AfCFTA. I thought I needed to start by establishing that for us to appreciate, what this policy is all about. As far as the issue of implementation is concerned, unfortunately, as has happened in many instances in Africa, our countries and leadership issues and corruption issues have again made it rather difficult to really make significant progress with implementation. Okay, most of the African countries are yet to begin to really implement. Nigeria is still at the stage of, there's a strategy document that's been developed, and we are waiting for the strategy documents to be translated into action. This is not to say that we don't have any import or export going on or trade going on between Nigeria and other African countries. Of course, there's always been, even before AfCFTA, but the issue of how to consolidate the market, how to make this trade, the volume of trading going on between Nigeria or any other African countries amongst ourselves, we are not doing well. So far, so good. We could do so much better. But anyways, as at now, Nigeria, as December of last year, we were the country's national action committee on AfCFTA were able to validate a set of strategy documents, and we are just waiting to see how they begin to translate the strategy documents into actual implementation to affect real trade going on in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Faisade. And I think you forgot to introduce yourself in the passion of the conversation. Maybe you can introduce yourself and then we can continue the conversation.
Okay, so my name is Faisade Charles Adeyemi. I used to be academic director of African Students for Liberty. I used to lecture at Elizabeth University and Wesley University, and I'm also the founder of the Charlie Institute. I want to believe most of us on this call must have heard about Charlie Institute. So I don't know. I think that should be enough now.
Thank you so much. I think it's very good to have this diversity in conversation, and I think I want to throw one question that's been asked in the audience before we continue, since I've seen you side the conversation around it, and it's from Bob Aston, and he was asking, he's curious how many countries in Africa have so far ratified and deposited instruments of ratification in the AfTA. I think since you had said the conversation, Faisal, maybe you can take it up, and then maybe we can continue after that. Also, just to the audience, you can keep typing our questions in the chat box, and we can be able to, or comments, and we can be able to have this conversation even outside of this. You can even tweet about it. So go ahead, Faisal.
Okay. So I think that about all the African countries have ratified AfCFTA. But now, I think about all have ratified. The problem is with implementation. Last year there was 7 countries were selected for a pilot phase of implementation, but we just have a situation where most of the countries are struggling with how to harmonize the AfCFTA's suggestions with their internal trade policies, and also to begin to translate to implementation. I stand to be correct, but I believe about all have ratified.
Okay, thank you. And I think there is also the think that's a very good concern to be able to raise. That leads us to the next discussion on aspects of ratification. And I just want to ask, and that's one of them mentioned, but what challenges do you as speakers see, should we anticipate in the implementation process, both at domestic level, that is within African countries, and also globally, with the implementation process of the AfCFTA? I think I'll start with you, Landre, and then we'll go to you, Leonard, and Faisal, we can hear from you.
So, sorry, Modesta, did you ask a question? I didn't get it. I just heard my name. I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. So the question was on the challenges dealing with implementation of the AfCFTA. So this, because Landre has, Faisal has mentioned aspects of localization of this ratification process. So what challenges are we looking at when it comes to implementation? So both at domestic level for African countries and also globally.
Okay. You're speaking of the domestic, the challenges to the implementation of AfCFTA in the continent. Of course, the challenges are a lot. And it is expected, for a continent where we still have, we don't yet have sufficient power generation countries. Even South Africa, which is Asian, is struggling with power cuts, has been struggling with electricity supply, since for some months now. But I think the foremost challenge with the implementation of AfCFTA is leadership, really, and that's because there's a need for a political will. Of course, it was first the unity of purpose, in agreement that this is going to improve the continent's economy, that made about 40-something nations sign and ratify the agreement. But thing is, within themselves, semi-processed goods. We don't manufacture some kind of good goods like machineries, equipment that Africans manufacturing output. We are not, with sufficient power supply, not having infrastructural deficit as well. The African Development Bank has been, investing in a project going on right now. That's a road network from Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire, to Lagos, a highway. For Africa, for a smooth implementation of AfCFTA, we need projects like that. We need infrastructure like that. Road networks that would cut. Imagine it being possible for
it seems we've lost you.
Goods to move on the road for. It is possible. It's just about financial capacity. That's one of the challenges. Is
Okay. It seems, Landry, I think you're muted.
Can you hear me? Sorry,
yes,
the network.
But your internet is a bit unstable, so we kept losing you at some point. Maybe we can try again. Let's see.
Okay, so is it clear now?
Yes, now we can hear you. Okay.
Sorry about the internet troubles, but yes, I was highlighting some of the challenges that the continent is faced with, in the implementation of this agreement, which is, as I said, infrastructural deficit, low productivity and low manufacturing output. We need infrastructure like, transport, power. These are really, these are the things that trade, runs on. Without good roads, without transport network across the continent, goods cannot flow. So those are some of the challenges in the continent, and also regulations. There are also, there are protection. Most countries now are taking up protectionist trade policies, trying to restrict certain imports or certain exports, just perhaps to improve their own domestic production and all that. So there's also that challenge. But from the external angle, I think that major global powers, those are the developed nations, the G7 and multinationals also have a role to play. Some of these countries actually do not, I don't know if I should state that like a fact, but I believe that multinationals and some that I think is facing the implementation of the agreement.
Thank you, Landry. And I think there's a lot to pick up from that, the aspects of infrastructure development, i.e. transport and power, the aspects of local activity, manufacturing, and policies as well on actually aspects of imports. And I think I want to go to you, Leonard, maybe also hear your thoughts on this, on these challenges, actually, so from both domestic, that is an African continental level, and also from a global perspective.
Okay, thank you, Modesta. I think the first challenge that I would say is one, ignorance. This agreement was signed in 2018. Get into power in May 2019. And up till now, I can tell you that the set of people that I've met in Nigeria to ask about, apart from the set of us that deals in the libertarian ideology, doesn't even know that something is called AfCFTA agreement exists. I was shocked when I was talking to a lawyer, and I was like, "Oh, the AfCFTA. Well, what's the AfCFTA agreement?" At least I've not seen at all. I've seen up to 50 people, learned people who have gone to school, graduates that doesn't know anything about the agreement. At the end of the day, these are the set of people that are supposed to ask for things. That are supposed to look into the agreement, see the loopholes there, and give out suggestions, either in writing, in whatever way they can do it, in webinars like these and all, but they don't know. That's number one. The second one, Larry kind of mentioned the lack of infrastructure. We don't have road network. We don't have good communication system. Logistics system is zero. If it's not minus in Africa, I'm not going to dwell more on that. Larry dwell more on that. The other thing that I want to mention is limited capacity. When I talked the other time, I talked about the SMEs. It's going to, you're going to enjoy in it and all. But this set of people should not forget that this set of people, they lack the capacity to effectively participate in the agreement. And why am I saying this? Because most of them lack the skills and knowledge. Most of them lack access to finance. And most of them does not even have the market information. If we can address this limitation, which is critical, will ensure the successful implementation in their access. Another thing is people that are resistant to change. I mentioned this at the Liberty Camp in Uganda last year during the AfCFTA agreement discussion. They're saying, why has Nigeria not implemented? I'm like, okay, Larry kind of touched it the other time. Do you know how much Nigeria make on their borders every day? And you are not saying, let this, we have to sign an agreement. The resistance to change. AfCFTA will face the resistance from some stakeholders. And this will include businesses, will include governments, who their main concern about the impact of the increase affects their operation. Because the more I can give access to you, if I'm making shoes, Modesta, and you are making shoes as well, you are my competition. But I've been in the business like 4 or 5 years before you. I've paid my dues, but because there is an agreement that just come in now, you just want to like enter the market and go. It's not going to be possible. So there are so many people like that that will be against it. And those kind of people, if those are not addressed earlier, there will be a problem. And let me just add one more. Another thing is political instability. Political instability and conflict in some African countries will pose challenges for the implementation of this agreement. Currently, if I stand corrected, Congo is not really safe. Part of Cameroon is not really safe. There is no way you are going to bring trade into a country that is filled with conflict. Trade only grows when there is peace. So political instability will really affect the AfCFTA agreement also. And if these 3-4 things that I mentioned, plus what Larry mentioned and what my professor, I used to call Fishade my professor, is the big man of the house. And he has been a very good supporter for what we do at Face of Liberty International alongside Larry. I really appreciate 2 of them. And it's an honor, it's a very big honor for me to be on the same call with them right now. They are like my big boss. So those 4 things and other things that they're going to mention, if those challenges can be worked on and head on, not when it started, but head on before it actually come into play, I think we can work well with the agreement in Africa. Thank you. Back to you, Modesta.
Thank you, Leonard. And I think I'll be coming back to you with a question. There's a comment in the chat. I think I'll come back to you on it. Maybe we can hear from you, Faisade, on what your opinion is on the same. You're muted.
Okay, yeah. Leonard really covered the basis on challenges. You did a very long list of challenges and it's almost exhaustive. And Leonard, I mean, I met you in the libertarian space, so don't whine me, with all the professor talk. And yeah, anyways, to the question. I mean, he's talked about Leonard as well as Larry. Between them, they've talked about infrastructure and all these issues. But I think one of the, and especially critically, the issue of awareness and capacity, information, and so on. But one of the critical things that I have noticed, which I've not really heard a lot of people talk about is the fact that the people who are to be the critical stakeholder, which is those who are actually going to be affected by these policies, are hardly, part of those who discuss or are in the conversation around these policies. For example, Leonard talked about lawyers, and so on. Fine, these are the policy. Well, lawyers are supposed to know about the law to interpret, and sometimes they are involved in policy making. But how about the traders themselves? That's like the most critical stakeholder, people who are in maybe manufacturing and who are just basically traders, and we're talking about free trade. Sometimes it looks like people don't even realize that free trade is about trading. It's as simple as that, So I'm very interested in pointing out, just like Leon did, the issue of capacity and awareness, but not just generally, however, but specifically amongst those who are in trading. How much of people who are, and when I say trading, I'm not talking just about the small traders. Sometimes even there are big traders in each country who control markets across cities, who control, they are major distributors. Maybe they are importers from Europe, for example, and they have a chain of distribution across the country, whatever country we may be talking about. You find that these people are actually also not aware of what the free trade policies are saying, might mean for their business, the opportunities and that you might throw up, and so on. So this lack of awareness is very critical. But there's another slant to this lack of awareness issue, which is misinformation. There are many people have the wrong idea. Many people, you cannot say they're not aware because they know there's something like AfCFTA, okay? So they are aware. But now, you now go to the next level. What is the nature of the awareness or the information that they have? And you realize that they actually have wrong information. So I'm talking about people who think that for some reason, maybe they've been misinformed and they think that AfCFTA is against their interest. They think that is some white, some Western, imposition. Some people talk about, is the United Nations World Trade Organization's idea, or whoever's idea from the West, European Union or World Bank, and they would say like, no, these people are coming to impose these things on Africa. That's what some people think about AfCFTA. That's all they've ever been told. That's all they know of. So we really need to do a lot of more work, like the great work you guys are doing on this call that we are all doing, to enlighten people and correct the misinformation that they have about AfCFTA. So beyond the issue of misinformation and lack of information, lack of awareness, of course, there are issues around. I don't want to talk about infrastructure and things that have been said. So there's the issue, for example, of corruption, which I don't think anybody has really talked about. Sometimes when you go to the borders of Africa, you discover that, because at the end of the day, most of the movement of goods are going to happen cross-border, okay? Whichever way you want to look at it, even if you're coming by air, in a sense, air is also border. I hope Modesta is here. Hello, are we on the call?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, thank you. So you realize that because when you look at things like policy changes, you talk about the status quo, which is the prevailing situation as of today.
Yes.
Right. You talk about the status quo and then the desirable, point you want to be at. So the status quo, we can see clearly that in West Africa, for example, we have an ECOWAS agreement that has been there for decades. And the ECOWAS agreement has not really been successful. And the reason, so many reasons, but essentially you have, the problem of corruption at the borders. People are supposed to be able, already in the status quo, people are supposed to be able to move freely between West African countries. But unfortunately, the custom agents, the immigration officers, and all kinds, and even non-state actors, they collude at the borders to frustrate the ECOWAS agreement. And the same thing applies to other other African regions like the Southern African region. Every other region already has subsisting agreements in the status quo prior to AfCFTA. And so you can already see that, and it's already happening, the same factors that have prevented ECOWAS is being taken. So that's going to be something to definitely watch out for. It's going to come in different forms. Whereas a lot of ordinary people, I mean, I was on a call recently where somebody from Ghana was talking about their country's implementation of AfCFTA. And Ghana is Ghana is the headquarters of AfCFTA in Africa. And they are very much ahead in terms of implementation. They are very much ahead, obviously, for obvious reasons. You know, they are one of the 7 countries, the pilot, started a pilot. And then they were, but I can see how it can become a corruption story. Maybe it already is, maybe it is not, but whichever way, you will see how it can easily become so. So in Ghana, they are licensing, companies to go ahead with AfCFTA. And they have licensed part of the AfCFTA arrangement. And I just thought about Nigeria, like 30 companies to be part of it. Then they're trying to get other people through. Now, that is a gatekeeping process that, if care is not taken, very quickly make things go very wrong in a very corrupt way, So we are going to be having a major challenge in terms of, in addition to issues of capacity, issues of information, and all of that. Currency can also be a factor. In fact, one of the, like I said, when I spoke initially when I joined the call originally, one of the things we need to remember is that AfCFTA is a policy of the African Union. And that also corrects information that, maybe it's World Bank or it's all this. Of course, they support this policy, they have inputs, but fundamentally, AfCFTA is a policy of African Union. That is one thing we need to make sure it gets into the minds of our people. But AfCFTA is not the only policy of African Union. There is another policy of Union that is also very, very important, and it's been a very serious delay, which is going to impact on the possibility of smooth implementation of AfCFTA. And that second policy of African Union has to do with a African Union currency, for Africans to have a single currency, just like Europe, for example. Of course, Europe also have their own free trade arrangement, but they don't just have a free trade arrangement. They spend euro, across Europe. And so trying to do AfCFTA, in our case, with multiple currencies, without a single African currency, is going to be a major challenge, okay? For obvious reasons, it's going to be a major challenge. This just reminds me of what Leonard was talking about earlier, in the case of Nigeria, where we currently are new Naira, between the old Naira note and the new Naira note, and there's a big competition everywhere. So, well, at some point, for AfCFTA to be really effective, definitely we will need a currency that is accepted across our border. In fact, it's almost, to me, it looks like those two things can hardly be separated, really, to be realistic. We really cannot have a very effective AfCFTA until we have, an African Union currency. And African Union currency looks like a very old right now. I don't know where that comes from, but if you're talking of challenges to AfCFTA, I think it's one of the main things.
I think
Modesta?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yes.
Perfect. I think we've been able to exhaust just how much the challenges are, and there's a diversity in how the challenges look like. I mean, we're looking from infrastructure to aspects of currency, which is an economic issue. There's aspects of corruption, that's a social issue. And I think, and also political instability that was mentioned. I think this also just pinpoints at how this implementation process needs to look at, different aspects of lives of people, of Africans. So from the social, political, economic angles. And I think also at some point, Faisali, you've been able to answer Bob Arson's question, whether it's an aspect, is it a question of misinformation? I mean, if it's a question of ignorance, or it's a question of misinformation or a lack of awareness. I hope, Bob, that answers you, because you've been able to talk about how there's still insufficient awareness among the different people. And thank you also for highlighting that such conversations in such platforms is a way of also mitigating such issues. So I want to now kind of shift a little to the question of private sector versus public sector. So we know that AfTA is a free trade area, and all different actors have different needs. So public sector have different goals, and private sector have different goals. So I want to find out now from you, Landry, maybe you can tell us, what do you see as the role of private sector versus, or public sector in realizing the full potential of AfTA? Because all of them have different objectives, all of them have different goals, but to some extent, it all comes to economic growth, profits also, and at the end of the day, food on our table for every single person. So, what do you see is the role of public or private sector in implementation?
Okay, thank you, Modesta. So before I answer that question, Shade raised some important points there that I also like to buttress, and that's about the case of awareness. But I mean, I don't want to spend so much time, because he already said it. The need for for the private sector, for the public, to know what AfTA means, and to have an understanding of the potential gains that's in need for Africans. I think it cannot be understated. However, I also want to mention a point that he raised, that's about currency being a challenge. So sometime last year, the African Export-Import Bank actually, in collaboration with the AfTA Secretariat in Ghana, knew that currency would be a challenge, and they actually came up with something which is sort of like an innovation, but we still have to see how it's going to pan out in the end. It's called PAPS, that's Pan-African Payment Settlement System. So I wrote an article about it sometime last year. It started last year, and the title of my article was PAPS, a crucial payment system for the African market. And basically what they are doing is, with the understanding that it is a huge task to come up with an African currency. There was a time we had ECHO, they were going to come up with a currency called ECHO, and then at some point, the Anglophone countries and the Francophone countries were not able to reach an agreement. So they knew that's going to be a task that may not be easy, to resolve. So they came up with this PAPS innovation, which is kind of a centralized payment system for, that makes cross-border payments in Africa less expensive, makes it faster. So in writing that article, I found that, the way payment works for intra-African trade before PAPS was that, with what, I want to remember the name of this thing, but let me not keep that. There's a banking system that is currently being used that makes payment go from, for instance, you want to buy goods in South Africa, your payment is first routed to the US, to US particularly, before it is routed back to South Africa. So PAPS was created to eliminate that long road. So with PAPS, which was also, they did a test phase with the West African central banks. It will work with the central bank and the commercial bank. So the aim of that is to make intra-African payments faster and less expensive. So I think something is in the way with the commitment that I see that the AfTA Secretariat, the AFDB, Afri-Exim Bank, the commitment that they are putting into AfTA, it makes me optimistic despite all the challenges that we have highlighted. So to move quickly and answer the question that you asked here about the role of private sector and how to support and the public sector, I think that what we are seeing is that a private sector that is not aware, that is not well informed, Faye and Leonard just talked about the need for people to be more aware, about this. So a private sector that is not well informed about AfTA, we cannot take advantage of it. But I think that more and more, this is getting more increasingly more popular in most African countries because of the commitment of of the stakeholders and the way it's been making the buzz in the media. So it's getting more popular, but there's still so much work to be done. However, the private sector just needs to support the government in ensuring the implementation, because what we've seen, I remember in 2018, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria actually when President Buhari refused to sign the agreement at first. The Manufacturing Association of Nigeria supported the refusal, because, and this is just basically because of protectionist views. They're scared that if you open up countries, my other companies will cheaply maybe, or be more quality than theirs, would come compete with them, which may make them lose their market share. So there is that fear for businesses, which make up the private sector. So the private sector needs to be in support, needs to understand that in the long run, this is going to be a win-win for them and for companies coming into this market and countries that we can also ship to. So as for the public sector, I think that's also getting increasingly popular, because more and more we're seeing state government, like Lagos State recently in January established a panel of AfTA panel, in thinking that Lagos needs to also sit up now, even if Nigeria isn't, let Lagos sit up and start thinking of how to take advantage of this. So it's getting increasingly popular, even though there's still so much work to do. So we all just need to support, as a civil society, the private sector and the public sector. It's just about understanding that in the long run, this free trade agreement is going to be a win for all.
Thank you, Landre. And I think I really like your emphasis on also understanding and integration between the different sectors and also civil societies. I want to throw this to you, Leonard, and then we can have comments from Ifeasade on the same aspect of private sector, public sector role in implementation.
Okay, thank you, Modesta. I'm going to talk about three. It's always three, right? The first one will be driving trade and investment. The private sector can help in driving the trade and investment. And how do I mean? We all know that the private sector is the main driver of trade and investment. And the AfCFTA agreement will provide an opportunity for businesses to expand their operation across the continent. So if they take this advantage and take the advantage of new markets, it will not only increase their business, it will also increase their competitiveness. So the private sector, the first thing they can do is driving trade and investment. The second thing is fostering competition. How do I mean? Introducing new products to the market, introducing new services, and introducing new technologies to the market will help, because this will stimulate economic growth and development. And not just that, it will improve the quality of goods and services available for the final consumers. I made mention of MTN, the ISPs we have in Nigeria the other time, MTN, Glo, 9Mobile, whatever. All of them come in, the more product, improved service you give, the more markets you get. So it will improve and foster competition. And the third one we're talking about is to empower small and medium enterprise. If the private sector jump on this, the private sector will help empower SMEs. By what? Providing them access to finance, providing them access to training, and providing them access to markets to sell their product. As much as the SMEs are a crucial part of the economy, and they have a significant potential to contribute to economic growth and job creation. So if the private sector could work with these three that I mentioned, it will be fine. It is not exhaustive, But now let's talk about the public sector. The public sector can only do one thing that I think. And when I hear the public sector, I hear the government. I hear the ministries. That is what is in my head. Like you said at the beginning, whatever we say on this call is our opinion, not necessarily the opinion of Liberty Spark. You drop a disclaimer at the beginning, Modesta. I catch that. Okay, so what I believe the public sector could do is just basically creating a favorable environment for trade and investment. There is a question inside the chat box that I will try to link into this. Bob says, could it be that the issue of not ignorance is not ignorance, but rather most African countries have not done much when it comes to sanitation awareness creation on AfCFTA? And this talk boils down to the public and private sector. I want to say quote the word of the 48th president of America, Ronald Reagan. He said, the 9 most terrifying words in English language are, I am from the government and I'm here to help. Larry mentioned it the other time, civil societies, individuals, what you are doing right now, creating this event online, what some of us have done in the past to create the awareness on AfCFTA, that is what is going to make many people understand it. If the president of the free world can say the most terrifying word is, I'm from the government, I'm here to help, then we should accept it that nothing good is coming from the government to help us. We as an individual, civil society organizations will do much of the work. Oh, they are trying. I'm not saying the governments are not trying. They are trying. But if we really want things to happen, there's a popular adage. I don't know if it's popular in Kenya, but it's popular in Nigeria. If you want to get something done fast, Larry, how do you say it? Do it yourself. If we want people to know fast, we need to do it ourselves. We need to let people know ourselves. Create events around it. Create talks around it. Open discussions around it in any way you get yourself and you see these people are ignorant of this activity, of this understanding. Give the understanding to them. Because if we don't do that, nobody's going to do it. And let me finish this part by quoting the famous genius scientist Albert Einstein. He says that there is no way let me put it in the way it says, lunacy is trying to do the same thing the same way and expect different results. We've tried the government hands. Let's try the individual hands and see if more people will understand what we are saying and get full grasp of it or not. Thank you very much. Back to you, Modesta.
Thank you, Leonard. And I like the quotes. If you want to achieve something, then you have to do it yourself. And I think that's a challenge to every individual and even the sectors. And also the aspect of, we also have to be aware of what we're getting ourselves into, the knowledge, the capacity of, how to engage to the AfCFTA. I want to throw this next segment to you, Faisade, and also while reading a comment from Reinhard, where he says, there's also a need or opportunity for African governments to look into non-tariff barriers to intra-African trade. Once this NTBs, that's the non-tariff barriers, are unlocked, then the enabling conditions shall have been largely created. So I think this is also like a point for us to also discuss about. But Faisade, maybe we can get also your opinion around the same private sector, public sector role, and also maybe you can also add a bit into the aspect of the trade barriers.
Okay, Modesta, thank you very much. Yeah, so just as Leonard Jane has stated well, and also Larry Peters, first of all, let me say that what we need is a collaboration between both sectors. In as much as we as libertarians know that at the end of the day, the government doesn't do anything. It's individuals, cooperating individuals in form of organizations, in form of businesses, in form of think tanks and so on. It's cooperating that really gets things done. I always tell people that even when you say government at third road, if you say, oh, this road was built by government, at least in Nigeria, at the end of the day, who built the road? Is it a government parastatal that built that road? It's going to be a private company that built that road. A private company built that road. Government does not build roads. They might award a contract, but the roads are usually built by private companies, you know? And even if it's a government parastatal that built the road, like maybe the Ministry of Work actually built the road, even if I have not seen where that happens, not in Nigeria, I don't know about Kenya. But even if that happens, the ministry did not give out a contract to a private business, they built it themselves. They have staff that build roads. Even if that happens, they've just used taxpayers' money to do it. So yeah, we know that at the end of the day, it's down to private businesses to trade amongst themselves across the continent to make this whole thing work. However, we are in a situation where the government is the gatekeeper. The government is the regulator. And like Ayn Rand said, we cannot dismiss the role of government in anything that has to do with, security of lives and property within territorial borders, within the context of borders, and also the role of government with regards to adjudication, so that if there are disputes, they have to adjudicate. And this is what gave birth to the regulatory role of government, that at the end of the day, government is required to regulate. So within the ambient of these regulations that has to be led by government in the context of AfCFTA, there needs to be more collaboration and integration between both sides. I would love to see an organic market-driven approach to the implementation of AfCFTA. It's not happening yet. It's not happening exactly, but that's what I would love to see. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons why AfCFTA is getting some kind of pushback, like Larry Peter mentioned, Manufacturing Association of Nigeria, endorsing our president's initial resistance to signing AfCFTA. Those kinds of pushbacks many times are coming from the fact that this document did not really originate organically, develop from within the business leaders in Africa themselves. Like I've said, I've tried to dispel the idea that it came from World Bank. I've tried to dispel the idea that it came from European Union or from UNWTO. I've said, look, this is an African Union policy. But that being an African Union policy, which is good in itself, does not answer the question of, is it the policy of the traders in Africa? Or is it something that African Union, which is basically government representatives, African government representatives are somewhat introducing, I don't want to use the word imposing, introducing to the traders, So there is that need for us to have ownership for people who are actually in business, who are in manufacturing, who are trading, for them to actually have a sense of belonging, for them to take ownership. It has to do with awareness, it has to do with collaboration, it has to do with networking and all of this, but this has to happen so that both sectors can work in sync. I can say efforts to do that, but we can do much better, So now, like Leonard clearly stated, at the end of the day, the real trading, the financing from the banks, the small, medium enterprises that have to be supported to grow and all of that, a good chunk of that will come from, private sector financing, because the government, central banks and all of what have you could do, Bank of Industry and the like, would do their bit, but definitely a good chunk of capacity building, a good chunk of funding, and scaling up has to come from the private sector. And also organizations like Community, organizations like Charlie Institute, these are all private sector organizations. We are in the private sector. We are playing our role, and we want to see more of such from our side, One of the things that, I would like to see happen when we make greater awareness and all of that. It's a situation where a child in a secondary school, in any village in Africa has a vision, a dream to become a trader that trades across continents, and that's to just paint a vivid picture of, where we should be and what is somewhat missing. Of course, people grow up. There are people who have ambition to, just as some people want to be engineer, doctors, and all of that. There are people who have ambition to become, big businessmen. But you realize that they did not picture it as businessmen who trade in a way that impacts Africa, in a way that improves, collaboration and cooperation across African borders. People would rather dream to trade with China. People would rather dream to trade with America, than to trade with Kenya or Morocco or, Uganda and so on and so forth. So these are the kinds of things that this policy is meant to change, and we can only hope that we have better and greater collaboration, between the private and public sector to make it happen. But definitely, it's going to take both sectors working together assiduously for this to work.
Thank you so much. And I think I like how you've highlighted the different roles different stakeholders play. Public sector plays a key role in awareness creation, capacity building, outsourcing some of the services to be able to meet some of the challenges we talked about initially, infrastructure development, private sector being the part of the finances as well. So I think as we round up, I think this has been a very great conversation. And just lastly, as also some sort of parting shot, I'd really like to hear from you as our speakers. What do you see as the steps that we should be able to take to be able to ensure successful and sustainable implementation of the AfCFTA, especially, from a perspective of the challenges you've talked about during the conversation today? So what sustainable and successful measures do you think we should take to be able to, fully realize the objective of the AfCFTA? So I think on a whim, I think I want to start with the triple man. Leonard, maybe we can start with you with the three. Today you said you're giving us 3 points each. So maybe we'll start with you and then we'll go to you, Landry, and then we'll finish with you, Faisade. And yes, feel free for the participants, if you have any questions, comments, we'll be able to go through them fully during the last bit of this conversation. So go ahead, Leonard.
Okay, thank you, Modesta. Okay, I'm going to put 3 points. The first one there is building capacity. I believe if government and businesses invest in developing the necessary skills and knowledge to effectively participate in the AfCFTA agreements, it will be worthwhile. And this will include training on trade policies. Charlie mentioned it the other time. Most people don't even know policies. I can tell you with all facts that most of the people that I've met, when I can say up to 90% of them, when you mention policies to them, like, oh, I can't deal. People don't like reading policies because it's all of jargon. Can we create trainings to actually break it down for people, trade policies? Training them on negotiation skills.
I think we've lost Leonard. Maybe Landry, you can jump in and then we'll circle back to Leonard afterwards.
Okay, Modesta, did you call me now?
Yes, I did.
Okay, yeah, so it's been an interesting conversation. Thanks to Leonard Faisade for this interesting one, and to Liberty Sparks for putting it together. So, in wrapping it up, I think I like one of the things that you guys at Liberty Sparks have done. I know that Liberty Sparks sometime last year was at the borders in Tanzania, talking to traders along the border areas, helping them understand what AfCFTA and the benefits. we must keep popularizing this idea, letting people know, the populace, letting the private sector. I mean, it is very important. I like the direction that Leonard was going, with the thought of training, helping business people understand negotiation, getting them ready for the African market. However, I think one thing that for me, I mean, as someone who works in in the civil society sector, I think that we need to keep pushing the government, and that's because there's usually resistance to change. We all like the status quo. It takes extra effort, to get out of the comfort zone. We've been in the comfort zone. The way intra-African trade has been for Africa is a comfort zone. And now, this shift would cause some disruption. So we need to help in enjoying the conversations going on. When we see our government doing certain things, calling for public events, we need to get involved. We need to follow on what's going on, the development going on, so that we can be a voice for, a pro-free trade voice. We can be there when someone is coming up with a debate that may put the country in a different direction. So because it's when we don't get involved, it's difficult to submit our own opinion. But the other thing one thing that would be a sign for me that we are about to have a great African continent, one of the things would be the establishment of something called the Protocol on Free Movement of Persons. We can talk on goods moving from one part of the area, from one part of the continent to the other. We also need to talk about the movement of people. If in Africa, you can't move freely as Africans. I mean, when I think of the EU, I think of freedom of movement first before I remember the trade. I know that there are about 25 countries in the European Union where you can move from one place to the other. When Africa gets to that point, when we all know that we can move from one place to the other, goods will follow. It is the people that will take the goods along. Because I saw recently a popular Ghanaian YouTuber, Woody Maya or something. It was at the Aflao border. It was Ghanaian trying to, I don't know if it was buying stuff, but it was just a short clip. But he had an altercation with the border officials. Why? Because they were trying to rip him off, and he was saying, "I'm an African. I have the right to move across this border." So we need to also take this awareness to the border areas, to the custom officials, the border officials, so that with the freedom of people, free trade will be easy. And because I believe in the potential of AfCFTA for the African continent, it has a huge, huge, huge potential that can transform the continent, and we should get involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Lanre, and thank you for just emphasizing on the need for information development, systems, and training as well. I think I'll give you an opportunity, Leonard, to be able to finish before we lost you, and then we'll come back to you, Faisal, then we can be able to hear your comments. Go ahead.
So that is part of what we are saying. My ISP threw me out, but anyways, I'm back now. I was talking about building capacity the other time. The second one is to encourage the small and medium scale enterprise, right? And how do I mean? By providing finances for them, trainings for them, and giving them market information. And like any project, every project manager in this room right now that will watch later will agree with me that the final phase of a project is monitoring and evaluation. We need to create a monitoring and evaluation team or whatever it is to ensure that the agreement is actually achieving its objective and for them to identify areas for improvement. And this should include regular assessment of the impact of the agreement on trade, like as Faisal mentioned, on investors and other stakeholders. So I think those three that I mentioned, building capacity, strengthening the SMEs, and creating a monitoring and evaluation team to check the implementation and how it's working would work well for Africa. Thank you very much. Back to you, Modesta.
Thank you, Leonard. Faisade, maybe you can get your comments on the same.
All right, thank you very much, Modesta and Liberty Sparks, for organizing and inviting me to this program. And thanks to my colleagues, Larry, Peters, and Leonard. It's been a beautiful time with you guys. So for my parting words on the issue of steps, I think should be taken. So like everybody has talked about capacity building and all of that without trying to repeat what has been said. I want to very much key into something said by Larry Peters concerning, free trade of people, across the continent. It's quite almost ironical that we're pushing free movement of goods and we still have challenges with free movement of people themselves. So obviously that's a very, very fundamental step, having a protocol, an effective one that allows people to move freely across the continent. It looks like a natural first step to ensure if we're going to have a smooth AfCFTA situation, So besides that, when I spoke earlier on, I mentioned the issue of currency. Again, just as you need to have, you really ideally should have an effective system that allows free movement of individuals. It just naturally also follows that you better have a sort of unified currency system, in place if you're going to really, really have an effective trade going on seamlessly. But in the absence of those two, which is the context of where we are right now, we are working without those two. So we still want to improve and have AfCFTA implemented. So one of the things that we could do, just like Larry earlier on spoke about, I think he called it PAPS, some financial integration tool. We do need an integrated African market information system that would enable traders and manufacturers in different parts of Africa to have information seamlessly about what are the goods, what are the comparative advantages, what are the goods produced in X city, in Lesotho, in Gadagudu, at what price, and so that people can make market decisions better. The truth is that if a trader in Aba who deals in shoes knows that his shoes are worth 20 times their price in Burkina Faso, and the cost of transport is not a great deterrent. Essentially has information that shows him that it will pay him to send his shoes to Burkina Faso than to send it to United Kingdom. He would definitely rather send it to Burkina Faso. So that's what a market information system does. And we actually don't have that right now. And again, that goes back to the previous question you had a while back on what private sector can do. This is an area that private sector people can look into to create an integrated African market information system that will give information about prices and goods that are in supply. I mean, sometimes in Nigeria, you have things like tomatoes, when they are in season in the northern part of Nigeria, they just go to waste. Onions, they go to waste. They just lying on the floor and rotting away. Those are very peculiar Nigerian problems. You would ask yourself, why are people not, preserving them by building tomato paste factories and all of that? Yeah, that's part of answering that question. But sometimes this information about surplus, and it's not just in Nigeria, in Gambia, I know that cashew also goes to waste, and things like that. There's need to have a centralized information system where all this awareness is available and people know how profitable it can be to do some kind of trading amongst ourselves, in that regard. So in addition to that, like we have said from the beginning, we need more awareness generally about this policy and capacity building and all of that. So so those are the steps, I would say, free movement of people, currency that is unified across the continent, and an integrated market information system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faisade, and thank you to all our speakers, Leonard, Landra, Peter, Faisade, for taking the opportunity to be able to dissect this topic and develop more understanding on the implementation process of the AfTA. And I think myself, I have been able to develop a lot of information from this webinar and learn a lot from the challenges and also how we were able to also solve some of the issues that surround the implementation process of the AfTA. And I think this is not the end of this conversation. As my colleague has posted in the chat, we'll be able to have this conversation up on our YouTube, Liberty Sparks, in the coming week, so we can be able to share this with other people and, at least if we can be able in our capacity, beat one challenge, that is the information and awareness systems and trainings as well. This is just one step that we can be able to take that we're doing as Liberty Sparks, and the speakers we've been able to have here have been able to share their thoughts and opinions, and also be able to give us feedback on how we can be able to develop more into integrating ourselves into the implementation process of the AfTA. I really want to thank you, our speakers, for taking the time. I also want to really thank the participants who stayed here for the past 1.5 hours, listening in and participating in the chat box with the comments and the suggestions and the questions as well. And I really hope that we can be able to continue this conversation further than this. Maybe to our speakers, you can be able to share your social media handles if in case some of our participants wish to reach out to you and further this conversation or even interact with you on another platform. And for us, I think Evans, maybe you can reshare our social media pages for us to interact more post this. And this is not the end of the conversation, as I have mentioned. This is a webinar series. So on the 24th, we'll be back here again talking about aspects of technology and the AfTA. And I'm really hoping to see all our participants today and even more and be part of this conversation. We have a great lineup of speakers as well. And once again, thank you so much. And in case I have forgotten anything, this is the moment before I say our goodbyes, or if I am closing anyone out, anyone who wishes to have any contributions or questions, comments, you can maybe raise your hand and we can be able to give you an opportunity. Thank you once again, and thank you our speakers, and we look forward to more conversations. Keep in touch with our social media handles and we'll be able to post more of our conversations and webinar series. Thank you everyone, and have a good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are. Bye.
Bye, thank you, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.